if I approach you and say, what do you do? And you say, for example, I'm a profit advisor, the client will be stunned, kind of like a deer in headlights for a second. And that's the reaction you want, because that means the client can't identify you with a generic label. They can't say, oh, it's just another bookkeeper. And the response it will inevitably trigger is they'll say, what's a profit advisor? And if you hear those words, I am telling you, you are sitting on top of a golden opportunity, because that means the client doesn't recognize what you do, and therefore they need you to define it. And that's where you stand out and point out your credentials. And you say, I'm a profit advisor, which means I have specialized skills in driving profitability.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's guest is Mike Michalowicz. And if you need pronunciation, you can go to his website and actually click a button and he will pronounce it for you, which is awesome. He is the entrepreneur behind 3 multi-million-dollar companies and the author of several books: Surge, Profit First, The Pumpkin Plan, and The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, which Business Week actually called the Entrepreneur's Cult Classic. So today's guest, is incredibly accomplished from an entrepreneurial standpoint. He's globally recognized as an entrepreneurial advocate and formerly a small business consultant for the Wall Street Journal and host of the Business Makeover segment on MSNBC's Your Business. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I actually heard of you quite a long time ago from my brother-in-law, Ron, who was absolutely raving about the Pumpkin Plan. And he just loved it. And he's a very good storyteller. So I think I've read the book through Ron. Just the concept of really developing your key strategies, like when you're growing a pumpkin. It's a beautiful metaphor for business development and actually any kind of planning, I would say. So he loves you. He loves your work. And so I've just started now listening to Profit First on audio. And I got to say, Mike, I absolutely love it. And I encourage all the listeners to listen to Mike on audio. And I'll tell you why. Because he actually sounds like he's in your car seat beside you. He's like not this stuffy, you're not this stuffy reading this book. It's like he's taken aside, okay, let me tell you something that it's not in the book. I love it. It's so fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, if Ron's listening first, shout out to Ron for spreading the word. I appreciate that. And I actually just reread Profit First. So I'm re-releasing it on February 21st, actually, through Penguin Books. So I revised and expanded the book. So I just finished rereading it on Friday of last week. And same thing. I like when an author reads something, but it's conversational. I want to feel the energy. And I also like when some authors do this. Gary Vaynerchuk famously does this, when he breaks from a straight read of his book and says, let me tell you why I wrote that chapter, or let me tell you a new insight that came out after the book. So this new release of Profit First, I have even more of that stuff because now I have a lot of these success stories that have come in. And so I start sharing the stories.
Beautiful.
Of those guys.
Fantastic. And you're absolutely right. It really does give a different feel to it. And I think the retention level for the listener goes way up.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to getting to this point for our listeners who have not heard anything, and this is their first time being introduced to you.
Sure. Well, you read off the bio, and I lovingly call that a CV or the curriculum vitae, but I have a different use of the acronym. I truly believe a CV stands for covers vomit, because most of my entrepreneurial endeavors have been gross and disgusting and something you don't want to talk about. And I think it's true for most people. But we hear the bullet points and they're like, oh my God, that, sold 3 companies and multi-million. It sounds so great. Well, all those things happened. I sold a company to a Fortune 500. I've sold a business to private equity. I've been involved in roll-ups. I've raised capital. But that's like one flash of a moment out of years of panic and problems, actually decades. So those businesses I grew and subsequently sold never made money. I was so growth oriented and so stressed out about how I was going to cover payroll. And I was saved by someone who thought they could fix the mistakes I've made. In retrospect, I see that. And what happens after I sold my second company, I fell in belief or in love with this concept of, grow fast and sell. Be growth oriented. And the profit really is when you sell your business, or profit happens when that big client swoops in. I always thought it was a future event. So I tried to replicate it. And my third try was as an angel investor. I started 10 companies and it was an abysmal failure. I was an abysmal failure and lost all my money and basically lost my mind. I went into depression and just, that's the vomit, but the most important part of, I think, of my entrepreneurial endeavors. Because for me, it awoken me to, there's got to be a better way, that surviving check by check is extraordinarily stressful and it doesn't need to be that way. And I set on a mission to, and this is, my mission now is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. And first, patient in this mission was myself. I got to fix my own challenges. And now I'm trying to roll it out on a large scale. I think there's 125 million businesses in the world. I think there's about 80 to 90 million that are surviving check by check, like literally do not know how to pay their bills next week. So I started a program. Profit First is the book that you mentioned. I've also started a program around it that empowers bookkeepers, because bookkeepers are the front line. They work with the entrepreneurs to start guiding entrepreneurs to profitability, but in a way that naturally supports the entrepreneur. So they don't have to change who they are. So they can become profitable just following the same habits that they already have. So that's my mission. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's awesome. And we have the same mission at Pure Bookkeeping, specifically for bookkeepers. But myself personally, I think that's why I love your work so far and love listening to your audio, is that I believe in the small business entrepreneur. I believe those are the people that make our countries great. And the more we can do to help them be great and have the money they need, the more they're going to do that for their families and the communities that they live in. So, it's.
I want to jump through the internet and like hug you. Yes, I'm so with you.
Internet hug. And so, the minute I actually got to say, like, you mentioned it a little bit there, but your white sheet or white paper or a little one-pager on how bookkeepers can position their business to get more clients is awesome. And it's so short, it's so impactful, it's so powerful. I loved it. And that was, I downloaded that and I'm like, Dave, get Mike on the show. So for listeners, you have to download this. You're going to go to our website. You'll get the link. And of course, I'm sure, Mike, you'll give us a link at the end there as well. But let's talk a little bit about that, because what I have to say, what I really loved about it is all of the experience that you've had over the past 5 or 6 years, maybe it's more now, and embedded in that one page.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's 10 or 11. I actually don't have it sitting in front of me, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I think one unique perspective that I came from as we were writing that document, as I was preparing it, was I've hired a lot of bookkeepers in my life for my businesses. When I was an angel investor, I think I've worked with 10 or 15 different bookkeepers. And one of the big ahas that I had was that bookkeepers need to be different. And quite frankly, this is true for any industry you're in, but particularly bookkeepers. When I ask someone what they do, and a bookkeeper responds, says, well, I'm a bookkeeper, they instantly put themselves in what I call a generic box. It's like if I say the word elephant, the people listening, we can't help but picture an elephant in our mind. And we can try to resist as much as we want, but we see an elephant. And the reason is our minds do these pictorial associations with words. It's the easiest form of memory. It's called mnemonic memory, and it's the easiest form of memory. And what it allows us to do is to shortcut the requirement for any future knowledge. Meaning, if I say elephant, I don't need to say it's a big animal with 4 legs and a long trunk, kind of like a nose. I don't have to explain it. You know what it is. So it expedites communication tremendously. So it's a great convenience tool in communication. But we as bookkeepers, we fall into traps. When I approach someone and say, what do you do? And they say, I'm a bookkeeper. In my mind pops up a bookkeeper. This person clicking and clacking away at the keyboard, writing some checks out, preparing an accounts payable list. And when that picture draws my mind sees every bookkeeper the same. Every time you say the word bookkeeper or elephant, the same elephant pops in my mind, the same bookkeeper. So the problem is now I see in my mind that all bookkeepers are the same. So if you approach me and say, you're a bookkeeper, my mind says, don't need to say anything else. I know what you do. And you can go on saying, listen, I've worked with very complicated clients that require inventory management and so forth. I have these credentials and this background and experience that really is applicable to your needs. And in my mind, I'm like, a bookkeeper's a bookkeeper because the picture popped up. So one of the principles, and perhaps arguably one of the most important, is to change the label you use when you present yourself, because we don't want to fall in that generic box. The example, and believe it or not, this is just one of the 10 things on there. I write it in one paragraph, but I'm giving the long explanation now. If I approach you and say, what do you do? And you say, for example, I'm a profit advisor, the client will be stunned, kind of like a deer in headlights for a second. And that's the reaction you want, because that means the client can't identify you with a generic label. They can't say, oh, it's just another bookkeeper. And the response it will inevitably trigger is they'll say, what's a profit advisor? And if you hear those words, I am telling you, you are sitting on top of a golden opportunity, because that means the client doesn't recognize what you do, and therefore they need you to define it. And that's where you stand out and point out your credentials. And you say, I'm a profit advisor, which means I have specialized skills in driving profitability. I have a mechanism that'll help you drive profit in your business. I have all these credentials and so forth. And then you wrap it up like this. You say, and by the way, I leverage all of my bookkeeping knowledge. I have all the abilities of a bookkeeper, but all bookkeepers have that ability. And what we're doing basically is pushing away the generic label of bookkeepers and saying, I'm different. And it all gets triggered by coming up with a new, unique label.
It's fantastic. And really, I love the fact that it's so simple for people to do. And it's something that most bookkeepers are not thinking about, because they're bookkeepers. They're not, what you're talking about is, these are positioning strategies that a lot of people have spent a lot of time thinking about and working on, and this stuff works.
Yeah.
Mike, the thing I was thinking about as you were speaking is with their customer. Their customer is a small business owner, small business entrepreneur, however you'd like to call it. And I personally have come across a lot of these people. I work with lots of different entrepreneurs and business owners, and I love them. And I grew up surrounded by small business owners. In fact, every single person in my family at some point has owned a small business. Unfortunately,
that's cool.
Yeah, unfortunately not to great success, because my opinion, they didn't hire a great bookkeeper. They tried to do it themselves.
Yeah. You know what? I am with you 110%. The problem, I always try to look from the customer's perspective, and I've seen that over and over again. Why don't they hire a great bookkeeper? And because they feel it's unnecessary, because bookkeeping is easy, because my software does it automatically. And the problem then is not theirs, it's truly ours, because we're missing opportunities to really care for clients. So yeah, they're going to lose out. Their business may go under even if they mismanage it that much, but they're missing out on someone that can actually help elevate their business, someone that can bring them to the next level. So that again points to the client who says, I don't need a bookkeeper. The bookkeepers who say they're, and I just use profit advisors because that's what we tell our bookkeeper members to do, but you could pick anything as long as it resonates with you, meaning your abilities, And it sounds like a distinct technical term. Like, don't ever say I'm the queen of bookkeeping. That's a marketing gimmick. It's got to be a technical sounding term. But what happens is if you lead with that unique title you've assigned yourself, and now you can acknowledge to the customer, you know what? You're right. You don't need a bookkeeper. That's too rudimentary. But let me tell you what we are going to do to drive your business forward and ensure its, in this case, profitability. And then point back to, and I do use, and I'm very well versed in all the bookkeeping processes and skills, but you really don't need a bookkeeper. When we fight someone and say, you really need to hire a bookkeeper, you really don't know what you're doing with your business, it triggers a defense mechanism. It's like, someone comes to you and says, God, you really don't know how to dress, Michael. Like, what's going on with you? Like, instantly, like, who are you? You're offending me. But if you are looking for something specific and say, I really need someone who can help me color match ties, I don't come to you and say, you don't know how to dress. I say, I'm a color match specialist. So I talk to the thing that you see you need, and I happen to address the underlying stuff that you also need, but you aren't aware of. You really do have to sell to the want of the customer, not argue it, because they'll fight back. It's a natural defense. Sell to their want, but service their want and their need.
Absolutely. And, just that reframing of what you do right out of the gate, I think is fantastic. So, Mike, the Profit First, talk a little bit about Profit First, because I could probably, I'm guessing, have about a whole year's worth of episodes with you alone, just with your knowledge and the different books that you've written. And I'm going to probably beg you again in the future to come back and talk about other books that you're going to write, I'm sure. But some of your past ones too are great. But right now, Profit First really is a big focus from my interpretation of what's going on online. Tell us about that book. I think it's really valuable, not only for people to read for themselves, but I think as bookkeepers, it's important because the methodology that you're teaching in that book is actually something that could be one of the tools in the tool belt of our bookkeeping audience.
I totally agree. I hope every bookkeeper considers using this system or a system like it. It doesn't have to be Profit First, but a system like this. And let me say what it's not and then how it turned into. What it's not is it's not any more of those reports and traditional cash management. And the reason it's not that is because myself and the vast majority of entrepreneurs I've interviewed and worked with over the years don't follow the rules of traditional cash management. Now, kind of really playing this out is a good entrepreneur, as defined by bookkeepers, and appropriately so, by the way, should be able to read a P&L, cash flow statement, balance sheet, tie the numbers in, know your KPIs, know your budgets, know the ratios like the operating cash ratio, the inventory turn, know all this stuff and assess it on a periodic basis, weekly, monthly at least, but ideally weekly, and you'll know exactly where you stand. And that's what we entrepreneurs are told to do. But then what we really do is we log into our bank account, see what the bank balance is, and based upon our balance, we're making decisions on how to run our business. We literally circumnavigate all these tools and reports that are in front of us and just log into our bank account and trust our gut. And it objectively fails us every single time. Not in the moment, but business after business that runs off of this bank balance accounting, how much is in my bank account, usually burn through cash very quickly. So my question is, why does this happen? And secondly, I believe that, and there's a great book called The Power of Habit by a guy named Charles Duhigg.
I love it.
I believe that have you read that book?
I've read the book. I've actually spoken with Charles. He's a fantastic author.
Oh, wow. A phenomenal book. And one of the core arguments in there is you can't change your behavior. There's a kind of click whirl mentality, he calls it. You see the trigger and you just start doing it. The entrepreneur logs into that bank account. They're on their pattern. You can't stop it. But you can put guardrails around it to make, in some cases, a bad behavior your best behavior. And that's what Profit First is. It's a behavioral-based cash management system. And what that means is it allows the entrepreneur to continue to do what they always do, log into the bank account, see their balances, and then quote unquote trust their gut. But the guardrails that are in place is we use the envelope system. This is something that's, it's in everyone's family tree. At some point, someone in your family used the envelope system. In my case, my mother did it. So I had firsthand experience with this. My mother worked at a local manufacturer, actually right down the road from where my office is now, part-time. And when she'd come home, she'd cash in her checks and then take the cash and divide it up and put in different envelopes. One envelope said food. Another envelope said give back to the community. One was for the mortgage, and she and my father, same thing. They would divide money up into these different envelopes. And then when my mom went food shopping, she would work with what was in the food envelope. And perhaps the most interesting part was she always had enough money for food. Now, don't confuse that with having the same amount of money. She always had enough, meaning when she arrived at the food store, that's when she opened the envelope, and whatever's in there, she'd work with. And sometimes, of course, she was sick or worked overtime, so the money would vary, the percentage she put in there, but she'd work with what she had. In business, the core principle of Profit First is setting up these envelopes. Now, in my case, we call them plates, but set up these envelopes. Have the entrepreneur or yourself, and I encourage every bookkeeper, do it for yourself first. If you're going to authentically do this for a client, you must understand the system for yourself from a practical experience. But you go to your clients, your entrepreneurs, you have them set up multiple accounts. And I mentioned in the new revised version of the book, there's 5 key accounts that we have to have. But one is, for example, to pay the taxes. As year end comes, the tax panic ensues, and the entrepreneurs have got to dig money out of their wallets, and they get PO'd at the bookkeeper and the tax accountant saying, why wasn't this prepared? No. The business should be reserving the taxes on a regular basis on behalf of the entrepreneur. When the tax bills due, it pays the taxes. The owners, inevitably the last person to get paid, the best employee in the company is the owner. They work ridiculous hours. They will work through holidays. They'll sacrifice family. That's the definition of the best employee. We got to treat the owner that way. So we're going to have an account for the owner's compensation we set up. Another one for the profit itself. Profit and owner's comp is totally different. Owner's comp is for being an owner-operator. It means you work inside your own business. But the profit is distribution to people who have equity in a business. Equity meaning you had the courage and took the risk to start a company and you own 50% or 100%. That's the profit distribution. Just like if I own stock in a public company, when the distribution comes out, that's not because I worked for GE. It's because I invested in GE. So profit and owner's comp is 2 different things. And another key account, of course, is the operating expenses. But what happens here, Michael, is when money flows in, say $1,000 of deposits come in, the first thing we do is we divide up that inbound deposit into its different percentages, these different envelopes. And now when the money is in the operating expense account, instead of that $1,000 check just going and being available to spend, maybe it's only half of that. Maybe it's 50% of it. It's $500. And the initial adjustment's kind of brutal. People are like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. It's kind of an ice bucket challenge, kind of shivering pain. But the reality is that is the appropriate number for your company to run healthily. So it just gives them a whole new perspective on profitability.
Listening to Profit First now, it's like light bulb went off, and for me. And a long time ago, this is about, I guess, maybe 15 years ago, there was a book I read and talked about doing similar to this for just my personal finances. And I implemented that. Very simple, multiple bank accounts. One bank account is for paying all of the bills of life, and it's all set up automatic. Every month, the right amount goes in there, and it's just handled. And when I did that, the amount of before that, it was like, a check would bounce, or I would be like worried, or can I use my debit card? Will the rent check, is there enough in there? And when I changed this, it was like, that's handled. And then another bank account was my spending. It's like, I can use this to buy groceries. I can use it for, fun or whatever. And I actually think there was another bank account that was for fun and for actually, food and utilities and stuff like that. Your system applies to a business, and I've just never thought of it in a business sense before. And I guess it's because I've been trained, to have business degree, and, I've had small businesses, and it's always just one bank account.
Yeah, it's always been that way. And I think that's the only thing that's unique about Profit First. It's not like these are systems I just made up and said, maybe this will work. These are tried and true systems. So the envelope system's been around ever since I think money's been around. And there's other principles in there too. The pay yourself first principle, right? Where you pay towards your retirement first. Like a 401k is considered a pay yourself first system. Profit First has that component in it too. I think what makes it unique is just what you said. I think I'm the first guy who said, all those principles that work in our personal life work within our business, our personal business.
Yeah, I've never heard it, Mike, in anybody talking about this from a business perspective. And that's what's refreshing, is that there's a lot of businesses out there that would benefit greatly from doing this. And I mean, we're one of them. Like, we're just literally at a conversation with my business partner about setting up these different accounts. And the first thing he was like, I don't know if we need that many accounts. It's going to be expensive, right. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about that, maybe the resistance that people have to that kind of thinking. It's almost like this, we're what's that saying? We're penny wise, pound foolish, right? It's like, exactly. But that's going to cost us $1 a month. And it's like, well, yeah, but if we don't do it, what's it costing us?
Right. So I actually talk about those arguments. I hear them all the time. I've been speaking about Profit First now for 3 years. I'm literally tomorrow morning taking off again and doing another keynote on Profit First. And the most common resistance is exactly that. If I need to set multiple accounts, it will cost me money and fees. And the second most common thing I get is I can just do this on a spreadsheet. So I can kind of address both those things. When it comes to the multiple accounts, first of all, you don't need to incur the fees. There's a lot of banks out there that don't incur fees. I've worked with everything from Capital One Spark, who's really impressive, to the local, who we use as a local credit union, and they're amazing. No fees. They do get confused, though, when I walk into the bank and say, I need to set up another account. They're like, geez, you got 12 accounts now? Because Profit First, there's 5 foundational accounts, but as your business develops over time and you start leveraging the system, sometimes it makes sense to have more accounts. So the fees, don't let that deter you. They probably won't even incur. And if your bank says, you can talk to the bank manager too. Say, listen, I want to store more money here. I want to save more money here, but I need to use these multiple envelopes, these accounts to do it. Can you do something for me? And some banks jump right on that and make an adjustment accordingly. So do it. That small little effort, the returns are huge. The second part is I can just do this on a spreadsheet. And when someone says that, I get it. But then I respond to them and say, well, you can do it in your accounting system too. And how's that going? How's that serving you? And usually there's silence and say, well, I'm not profitable. Exactly. What we need to do is insert a system that works within our natural human behavior. If we log into our bank account to see our bank balance, that is the one spot I know you're going to go every single time. And therefore, I need the accounts there. If I set up a spreadsheet, you can circumnavigate that. You just go right to the bank account and you avoid looking at the spreadsheet. So any kind of supplemental system, and I've tried them because I wanted to do that, has failed me every single time. You got to get the account set up. But there's one last little tip. As I've been doing this, I get invited back to some events saying, hey, you should come back next year, do a follow-up presentation. And now I've done so many of these. I start off by saying, who remembers me speaking on Profit First? And if it's the same attendees, all the hands go up. And I say, who's honestly, who's doing it? And I have a room of, say, 200, maybe like 5 hands, 10 hands go up. And I used to get really frustrated. I'm like, I am telling you, I swear to God, this will save your business. You'll have more profits than you ever imagined. Just do it. I used to get upset thinking there was something wrong with people. And then I said, oh, no. The issue is me. I'm teaching one last fundamental part wrong. And what it was I would divulge the entire system, the elements we talked about today, and there's some more stuff. I would reveal all that stuff and put it on the table. And then I realized in the recent years that I'm asking people to do too much. It's like saying, hey, I want to get in shape. And I'm telling that person, you're going to run a marathon starting today. Let's go. It's prone for failure. So the one last tip, and if you're working with your clients and want to help them start achieving greater levels of profitability, don't do the entire thing to get started. only do one piece. And that one piece is have them set up only one new bank account at their current bank. They don't have to go to a new one. Go to their current bank, set up one new account, and we're going to label it profit. And it can be a savings or a checking account. That doesn't matter. But label it profit. And then every time a deposit comes in, take 1% of that money and put it in the profit account. And what that means is if they get a deposit, say of $1,000, 1% is $10. And if that client of yours can run a business off of $1,000, they can absolutely run their business off of $990. All we're doing is taking a small piece. And no, they won't get rich, and no, their profits won't skyrocket starting that way. But what will skyrocket is their confidence. Once they see another envelope that starts accumulating money, they'll say, hey, maybe this is worth moving that profit percentage to 2 or 3, and over time 5 and 10. And sometimes we have some people we work with, 20, 30, 40% profitability. It's amazing. But the successful people start very slow. No longer raise the bar and say, I'm all in, I'm going to run that marathon. We're actually going to lower the bar and start off very slowly just to win over your confidence in the system.
Yeah, it's great advice. And starting with one thing is another one of the pieces out of Charles' book, The Power of Habit. It's focused on one habit, and then other habits develop around that. So it's really cool. What I love too, Mike, is you mentioned it or started to talk about it. These are human behaviors around money, and we have all sorts of weird emotions and thoughts about money. And we're in a small business. It's more of a human that's running that small business when it's small. If it was a big business, they're going to have people to run those spreadsheets, like you say, and their job is to make sure the spreadsheet's managed and the accounts are managed. But as a small business, it's a reflection of you as an individual, as a human being. And so your system really starts to create new behaviors around money that force new habits, and the outcome is that businesses will be way more profitable.
That's right. It's funny. So I've studied the small businesses, and from revenue less than 100,000. The most common businesses, most businesses do under 250,000 annually. But I studied businesses all the way up to $50 million, and did find, you're right, there's a transition. At a certain point, a company is no longer managed by the owner, or at least fiscally managed by the owner. But what happens is they start setting budgets. So it is spreadsheets, as you suggested. But then the department heads, what do they do? They spend their entire budget. Actually, you'll sometimes get that phone call saying, I have XYZ budget. I need to spend it to get my budget again. Mm-hmm. And so what those large corporations are doing are the exact same principle. They set a number, they divide up into, now instead of 5 or 6 accounts, they have, say, 700 accounts. They just call them budgets. And those budgets are what they assign to the employees of the business. But one of those accounts is a profit account. Those large companies are pre-allocating profit. They say, we're running this at a 20% margin. The money comes in, it gets allocated toward profit immediately. Yes, in a spreadsheet, but it gets allocated to profit immediately. And then the employees are told, you got to work within budget. You cannot go over. And you better use it all, because if you don't use it all, you've proven you don't need it. So it's this very predetermined thing. And what happens in these businesses that we've been implementing profit first with, that OpEx basically becomes a budget. And it says, here's your, instead of $1,000 deposit, here's your $500 to run your business. And what I found is most businesses will actually use up all that money. But what's fascinating is they will get the same results with less money because it forces innovation. And if we have time, I just want to share one more story about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This was kind of, I think, the most important part of Profit First. One of the behavioral principles is called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law states that our demand for a resource is dictated by its supply, meaning the more available something is, the more we demand it. If I served you a very small plate of sushi, like say 2 pieces of a roll of sushi, chances are if you like sushi, you'll eat both pieces. If I serve you a plate with 20 pieces of sushi, chances are you're going to eat more than 2 because there's more available. You may not eat all 20. There's a certain point where it's just way too much, but you may eat 6 or 10 pieces. You'll eat more. And so that's Parkinson's Law. The supply dictates our behavior, how much we consume. Well, the story I wanted to share is about Apollo 13. It's one of my favorite stories because it points to how even the smartest people in the world are simply human animals and live by this Parkinson's law behavior. Have you seen the movie Apollo 13, Michael?
I have, yeah. It's a great movie.
Okay. It's a great movie. It's a real story, as you know. And this is what happens in the pivotal scene. It's a calamity from the get-go. It's the space race between the U.S. and Russia, and the U.S. launch up the Apollo 13, this capsule into outer space to circumnavigate the moon and come back with whatever findings they have. Well, they're up there during this horrific, disaster-ridden trip. The biggest problem happens. They are using the moon's gravitational pull to launch back to Earth, and the oxygen filters on the capsule fail. Literally, the NASA had developed these filters that took carbon dioxide, recycled it back into oxygen so the astronauts could breathe and live. They radio down, I'm sure you'll remember the scene, they radio down to Houston and say, Houston, we are losing our oxygen. We estimate 10 hours of oxygen's left before we die. And they had like 48 hours or something to return to Earth. Next scene, you see the lead engineer of NASA walking into a room with a big cardboard box. And there's these other engineers around the table. He takes the box and dumps it on the table. And all the engineers look at it. And he looks at him and says, we have to make oxygen filters within the next 10 hours out of this stuff. Do it. And they did it. They literally made oxygen filters out of like tubes and duct tape and wire and like a toothbrush. It was the ultimate MacGyver scene. And it happened in reality. The message or lesson behind this, though, is extraordinary. NASA spent tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, our money, to build the original oxygen filters. And they worked. They worked until they failed. Then when NASA, the same engineers had no time, they had 10 hours, no money because money was irrelevant at this point, and just mixed supplies, they created an oxygen filter that worked. And I'm not saying they should have done that from the get-go. I realize they used some of the materials and stuff that was already up there, but they were able to fix it. The thing is, the lesson is, they could have done something that was more stable, more reliable, more cheaply. They proved it from the get-go. But NASA, the engineering team said, you have tens of millions of dollars in your budget, make oxygen filters. And they found a way to do it for tens of millions. When they weren't giving any resources, they found a way to do it. That's Parkinson's law. We become extraordinarily innovative when our back is against the wall. And so with Profit First, when we allocate less money to the running of your business, your operating expenses, you will find the same results. You have to set the same standard for your business. The thing that will change, according to Parkinson's law, is you'll become extraordinarily more innovative. You have to find a new way. You have to break the industry rules because you have less money. So the greatest irony of all from Profit First, now that we've collected literally hundreds of stories that we have documented, thousands of emails and just outreaches to us, but hundreds of collected stories consistently, and this is what really opened my eyes, businesses that allocate their profit first actually grow faster than their competitors consistently because they are forced to become innovative and find more frugal ways to do things, more innovative, more industry rule busting ways to do things. So Profit First doesn't just make you more profitable, it seems to almost always facilitate better, stronger, faster growth.
Super exciting. I love it. And you know what I love about this conversation, Mike? Our listeners are going to be able to apply everything that you've talked about today and more when they read your book and consume all the information that you have. They're going to be able to apply it to their businesses. And those businesses are going to grow faster than their competitors, and they're going to have more money in their bank. They're going to be able to do the things they love to do in their life and a whole bunch more because of this mentality. And they're going to be able to help be the profit guardians for their customers and help them do the same things. And maybe all their customers don't implement everything, but it's the philosophy. And I mean, we could live our whole lives by Parkinson's law. I mean, it's, you want to achieve something, start thinking about Parkinson's law. It's fantastic. So, it's just the ripple effect that can happen here for our listeners. So I really want to just give you an opportunity to share, how can people find out more about you? Where's the best place to start and start consuming the good work you do?
Oh, thank you very much, Michael, for allowing me to do that. And I agree. I see this as a upward spiral. The change agents of the financial health, I believe, of this world are truly bookkeepers. We can serve entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, as you were saying right in the beginning, entrepreneurs will serve their family, their friends, their employees, and it will perpetuate this. For me, if you want more information on Profit First, you can just Google Profit First. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, any bookstore, airports. But if you want to get that download you suggested, it's at my personal website. It's MikeMichalowicz.com. Now, a couple things. It's brutally hard to spell. I actually sometimes still misspell my own name. So here's two ways to get to my website. If you go to Google and type in Mike, M-I-K-E, and then spacebar, Mick, M-I-C. By that point, Google will pop up the longest, most Polish name on the planet. That's me. Select that. It brings you to my site, and you can download it. If you want to remember a domain, my nickname in high school was Mike Motorbike because it rhymed. You can just go to MikeMotorbike.com. That too will forward you to the website and all these resources up there. Plus, Profit First and all my other books, you can get free downloads of quite a few chapters from the website.
And those, I have done that, Mike, and I got to say, those blew my mind. The amount of value and the simplicity of it. It just,
thanks,
such
Michael.
a fantastic. I got to say, Mike, you're a very generous, very authentic person. People listening, Mike has to be in your top 5 of the people that you put on your, if we call them advisors, business advisors. Mike is maybe number 1 or 2, right? I can't say enough about the work you do. So it's fantastic. We love it. And of course, we'll have links and everything at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com for people to go to and link right to your websites.
Thank you so much.
Mike, I just hate to have to end this because me personally, I'm a fan and I just have so many questions, and I hope we'll be able to have you back in the future to discuss other topics. And, you've got a whole bunch of stuff, as I mentioned. But I do really want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a real joy. Thanks for letting me share.
Well, that wraps another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guests and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.